She was my sister, or at least that's what the world told me. We grew up under the same roof, shared the same name and family stories, and wore each other's secrets like second skins. I defended her when others whispered. I forgave her when she slipped. I loved her with the kind of blind devotion that made me smaller, because loving her felt like loving home. In my first life, that devotion became my undoing. Her envy was slow and methodical. It didn't scream, it whispered. A compliment turned into a comparison. A favor became a claim. She learned the angles of my life, the way a sculptor learns the weak places in stone. And then she struck. First came the small betrayals. A rumor seeded in a conversation with the wrong person, a letter misplaced, an opportunity quietly redirected. I stumbled and stumbled again, baffled by how quickly the world tilted under my feet. I begged her once, in a moment of raw, breathless pain. Why? She smiled like someone about to open a gift. Because I can, she said, and then she smiled softer, as though she had given me a kindness. The big betrayals followed the pattern of careful cruelty. She framed me in the most public way she could invent. I watched my reputation crumble with the horror of someone witnessing a house they built collapse in front of them. She courted the man I loved with a patience I had never believed she possessed. He looked at her the way I had once imagined he would look at me, with worship, with a future whispered between his teeth. She took him like a thief, taking the only thing left in an empty room. By the time I stood to protest, no one wanted to hear me. People prefer villains to complicated truths, and my sister had learned how to wear sorrow like a costume better than I ever did. I lost everything, my love, my standing, my sense of self. They left me in the cold, and for a long time I thought the cold would be the end. When death finally came, it felt like a mercy at first, a quiet release from the rawness of betrayal. But fate, stubborn and strange, chose otherwise. I opened my eyes and found myself breathing the air of my childhood room. The calendar told me it was months before the first lie took shape. The past lay behind me like a map I could now study. I tasted the strange, sharp sweetness of a second chance. I did not leap immediately into vengeance. The reborn part of me moved with the patience of someone who had learned that haste is a fool's flame. I studied her the way one studies a dangerous animal, with respect, with measurement, and with an unblinking eye. She had ways I had never fully seen before, the way her laugh cut into a conversation and redirected attention, the way she placed herself in line with prospects and proximity, the tiny rituals she used to win trust and disguise ambition. She was charming because she practiced charm like a soldier practices drills. Knowing her weapons is the first step to disarming her. So I became still. I let her believe the story she'd written about me. The gullible, trusting sister saint who would always forgive. I smiled when she expected suspicion. I praised the very talents she used to make herself look indispensable. I fed her ego in public until it swelled like a bubble, because a bubble, when it bursts, makes a spectacle. She gulped the praise like water. She basked in the attention as if it were sunlight she had a right to own. Meanwhile, I rebuilt what she had broken in silence, repairing friendships she had poisoned, quietly proving my competence where she had planted doubt, correcting the small legal knots she'd tied around my choices. I made my private life a fortress, not by walls, but by careful alliances and undeniable truth. When she tried to fracture me again, her tactics had lost their edge. The rumors she repeated sounded hollow. The accusations she made bounced harmlessly off newly mended reputations because I had already fed the truth into the places that mattered. People began to see patterns, the familiar cadence of her stories, the way victims always emerged around her like a predictable constellation. I gathered proof as one gathers stones for a foundation, meticulous, patient, immovable. I documented lies, collected witnesses, saved messages and receipts she could not unmake. I made sure every thread of her self-fashioned narrative could be pulled and shown to be nothing but silk stretched thin over a scaffold of greed. I deliberately let her win in public small things. It disarmed her. It made her arrogant. She began to move with a reckless confidence, certain she had put me in my place forever. That arrogance was the kind of error you can set a trap around. I didn't shout. I calculated. When the man she had stolen married her, I smiled at the invitation and congratulated them both in front of everyone. Inside, every syllable was a seed. I kept close friends who had watched her acts and who were willing to speak with me when the time was right. I listened to the whispers of our shared circles and let them thread themselves into a tapestry that made her look less like a victim and more like the architect of multiple falls. When I finally stepped forward, I did it with an uncatastrophic surgical cruelty that felt more like righteousness than revenge. I revealed what I had, not for spectacle, but for restoration. I didn't tear her down before an audience drunk on scandal. I presented facts to those who held power over the things she'd stolen: legal authorities, the man who'd loved me, mutual friends whose credibility mattered. She tried to charm the room as she always had. But charm is brittle when weighed against evidence. People began to look past the practiced face and into the pattern beneath. Her lies, once a comfortable cloak, became a noose of her own making. When her world started to fracture in public, she did what she always did. She sought sympathy, spun tales of persecution, tried to make herself small and hurt so others would rush to console. But this time, those gestures were met with a different response. The people I had quietly rebuilt bridges with had their own memories now, not just mine. They remembered the kindnesses she had withheld, the manipulations she had performed, and the convenience of her misfortunes. Her cries for rescue sounded like rehearsed lines in a house that had already been emptied of the audience. Standing across from her the day the truth came clean, I did not savor her collapse. It was not a feast. It was a closing of a chapter that should never have started. I looked at her and felt no triumph that tasted bitter. I felt instead the cool, clear air of someone who had finally reclaimed herself. "You taught me everything I needed to survive," I said quietly. "You taught me how to recognize a hand that pushes instead of holds. Thank you." She looked at me with eyes that were no longer entirely hers. Eyes that had been hollowed by anticipation and then by panic. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again, searching for the script she had always had. None of it came. In the aftermath, I rebuilt with a different urgency than before. I did not need to reclaim the man she stole. I reclaimed the parts of my life that were mine regardless of marriage or title. I re-entered rooms I had left, not as a woman asking for forgiveness, but as one who had earned her place by the force of her steadiness. People apologized in the small ways humanity does: awkward messages, returned calls, invitations extended in tentative hands. Forgiveness was not a single moment. It was a slow accumulation of trust granted over time. I accepted what I needed to accept and let go of the rest. Rebirth is not about erasing pain. It is about using it like a map. I learned where the quicksand lies, where the bridges could be trusted, and where the masks would inevitably slip. My sister S. crown, the petty coronation of her envy, crumbled under facts and the patient, cold architecture of truth. She had expected to choke me with humiliation. Instead, she choked on her own hubris. If there is cruelty in this story, it is the cruelty of becoming what you most feared. Someone who watches calmly while the person who hurt you unravels. But cruelty, in my case, was a tool of justice. It was not about greed for her ruin. It was about the restoration of what she had stolen. Dignity, reputation, a future that had once been mine. Now, when I walk through the spaces we once shared, I carry a different posture. I speak with a voice that has been tempered by loss and remade by choice. I do not gloat over her absence. I simply fill the rooms she left empty with the life she tried to take. In the end, it was never about the crown she wanted to press on her head. It was always about who would stand when the music stopped. I stand.